The massive station hung in space like a silver wheel, spinning slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Nexus Station served as the heart of the Galactic Council, where 12 different species had met for over 3 centuries to discuss trade, territory, and peace. Today felt different, though, as representatives from across known space gathered in the central chamber to witness something that had not happened in over 50 years. First, contact with a new species. Ambassador Jake Morrison adjusted his simple, black suit and checked his notes one final time. Behind him stood Colonel Lisa Hayes in her crisp military uniform, her hands clasped behind her back as she observed the alien delegates with calm professional interest. They had traveled for 6 months to reach this moment, carrying with them the hopes and concerns of 8 billion humans back on Earth. The chamber itself was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. The Caethani delegation sat in their environmental pods filled with methane gas, their insect-like forms visible through the clear walls. The Veltar warriors stood at attention near the back, their massive frames covered in natural armor plating that made them look like walking tanks. Each species had claimed their traditional spots in the circular room, leaving the center stage for whoever held the floor. Jake stepped forward when the ceremonial chimes rang out, indicating the session had begun. The translation devices hummed to life, converting his words into the dozens of languages represented in the chamber. He had practiced this speech countless times, but standing here now under the gaze of beings that had mastered space travel while humans were still learning to make fire felt overwhelming. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I am Ambassador Jake Morrison, representing the species known as humanity and the planet we call Earth. We come before you today, seeking membership in this great alliance of civilizations. A low rumble came from the Veltar section. Their leader, War Chief Graktor, rose to his full height of nearly 3 meters. His voice boomed across the chamber even through the translation system. Another soft species seeking protection under our banner. Tell us, small human, what can your people offer the Council besides another mouth to feed and another world to defend? Jake had expected this challenge. The Veltar were known throughout the galaxy as the primary military force of the Council, and they took pride in their warrior culture. Every species that joined the Alliance had to prove their worth somehow, whether through technology, resources, or military capability. We offer our knowledge, our trade goods, and our commitment to peaceful cooperation with all Council species, Jake replied diplomatically. Humanity has much to learn from the great civilizations represented here, and we hope to contribute our own unique perspective to the Alliance. War Chief Graktor laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Perspective, words, pretty speeches. This is what every weak species says when they want others to fight their battles for them. He gestured toward his fellow Veltar warriors. The ancient protocols are clear. Any species seeking to join the Council must demonstrate military capability sufficient to defend themselves and their allies. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as other delegates discussed this development. The Zurathi, with their large craniums and pale blue skin, whispered among themselves in their analytical way. The plant-like Selani rustled their leaves in what Jake's briefing materials had told him indicated concern or disagreement. Council leader Zendar of the Zurathi raised one of his forearms for silence. His voice was calm and measured when he spoke. War Chief Graktor speaks of ancient traditions, but we must consider each application on its individual merits. Ambassador Morrison, your initial communications mentioned that Earth maintains military forces. Perhaps you could provide some details about your defensive capabilities. Jake glanced back at Colonel Hayes, who gave him a subtle nod. This was the moment they had prepared for during their long journey. Earth does indeed maintain military forces for our protection and the protection of our allies. We would be happy to provide a demonstration of our capabilities if the Council desires. A demonstration, War Chief Graktor repeated, his tone mocking. How many of your warriors would you bring for this demonstration? 1,000. 5,000, perhaps. We were thinking more along the lines of 12, Jake said simply. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant hum of the environmental system seemed to fade as delegates processed what they had just heard. War Chief Graktor's expression shifted from mockery to confusion. 12. he repeated slowly. You wish to demonstrate your species' military capability with 12 individuals. That should be sufficient for a basic demonstration, Colonel Hayes spoke for the first time, her voice professional and matter-of-fact. We can have Delta Squad here within 72 hours if the Council approves the demonstration. The Kethani delegate's translator crackled to life. Delta Squad, this is the name of your demonstration unit. Special Operations Team, Hayes clarified. 12 of our Special Forces personnel under the command of Captain Ben Clark. War Chief Graktor's confusion deepened. Special Forces. This implies you have regular forces as well. Of course, Jake replied. Every military has different specialized units for different purposes. Special Forces handle missions that require smaller teams with advanced training. And your regular forces? Asked Council Leader Zendar, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. How many of those do you maintain? Jake checked his notes, though he knew the numbers by heart. Earth maintains approximately 20 million active military personnel across all branches of service, with another 50 million in various reserve capacities. But for a simple demonstration, Delta Squad should be more than adequate. The silence that followed was deafening. Delegate after delegate turned to their advisors, checking translation systems, running calculations, and trying to process numbers that seemed impossible. The largest military force in the Council belonged to the Veltar hegemony, with just over 2 million warriors total. War Chief Graktor sat down heavily, his massive frame causing the floor to vibrate slightly. 20 million active personnel, he said quietly, and you consider 12 of them sufficient to demonstrate your capabilities. For a basic demonstration, yes, Hayes confirmed. Captain Clark's team has experience with first contact protocols and cross-species training exercises. They're well suited for this type of mission. Council Leader Zendar was furiously calculating on his personal device. Ambassador Morrison, may I ask what the total population of your homeworld might be? Earth currently houses approximately 8 billion humans, Jake answered. Our colony worlds add another 2 billion to that total. The chamber erupted in a dozen different languages as delegates abandoned all pretense of diplomatic calm. 10 billion individuals from a single species was unprecedented in Council records. Most member species numbered in the hundreds of millions at most. War Chief Graktor stood again, but his earlier mockery was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect or possibly fear. Your Delta Squad, he said carefully. What percentage of your total military force do they represent? Colonel Hayes thought for a moment. Special Operations Forces make up roughly 2% of our total military, so Delta Squad would represent approximately 0.00006% of our total active personnel. The mathematical implications hit every delegate simultaneously. If 12 individuals representing such an infinitesimal fraction of humanity's military could provide an adequate demonstration, what exactly were they about to witness? The red dust of planet Koros swirled in the thin atmosphere as 12 humans stepped off their transport ship. Captain Ben Clark adjusted his tactical vest and surveyed the massive military complex before them. The Veltar had built their testing grounds on this harsh world specifically to challenge even their own elite warriors, and no Council species had ever completed the full course. Behind Clark stood his team, each carrying minimal equipment compared to the heavily armored Veltar champions who watched from elevated observation platforms. Sergeant Amy Foster checked her rifle one final time, while Tony Martinez, their demolitions expert, examined the strange alien explosives they had been given for the exercise. Kate Williams lay prone on a nearby ridge, already calculating wind patterns and distances through her scope. War Chief Graktor's voice boomed across the testing ground through speakers embedded in the rocky walls. Humans, you will face 3 challenges today. First, zero-gravity combat in our orbital training facility. Second, survival and navigation through our toxic maze where the very air will kill you in minutes. Third, assault on our automated fortress that has never been breached by any living being. The assembled Council delegates watched from climate-controlled observation chambers built into the mountainside. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood with Colonel Lisa Hayes, both of them appearing remarkably calm given that the reputation of their entire species rested on the next few hours. Each challenge has defeated entire battalions of our finest warriors, Graktor continued. Your 12 individuals have exactly 6 hours to complete all 3 phases. Failure means your species lacks the military capability to defend Council interests. Captain Clark activated his communication device. Delta Squad Standard Formation. Martinez, you take point on the fortress assault. Williams, I need overwatch on the maze section. Foster, you coordinate the 0G portion. Ryan Bell, their technology specialist, was already connecting his equipment to the alien systems. Captain, their computer networks are surprisingly basic. I can map the fortress layout and disable about 60% of their automated defenses before we even start the assault. Negative, Clark replied firmly. We run this clean. No shortcuts, no advantages they did not specifically offer. We represent our entire species today. The first challenge began in a massive spherical chamber where artificial gravity could be manipulated in any direction. 50 Veltar combat drones, each the size of a small vehicle and armed with energy weapons, waited inside. The goal was simple: destroy all drones while navigating 3-dimensional combat without fixed reference points. What the Veltar expected was chaos. New species typically panicked when gravity shifted unexpectedly, becoming easy targets for the fast-moving drones. Instead, they watched in growing amazement as the humans moved through zero gravity like they had been born to it. Sergeant Foster led the team in a complex 3-dimensional formation, using walls and ceiling as launching points while maintaining perfect coordination. When gravity suddenly reversed, pulling everyone toward what had been the ceiling, the humans adapted instantly. They used their momentum to ricochet off surfaces, turning the artificial gravity changes into tactical advantages. Tony Martinez used his demolition expertise in ways the Veltar had never seen. Instead of trying to hit fast-moving drones with conventional weapons, he placed small charges on surfaces and used the gravity shifts to send shrapnel flying in calculated patterns. Kate Williams found that in zero gravity, her sniper training translated into impossible shots as she could position herself at any angle and use controlled movement to line up targets. The Ka-50 combat drones that typically took Veltar warriors hours to defeat were destroyed in 18 minutes. Impossible, War Chief Graktor muttered from his observation post. No species adapts that quickly to changing gravity fields. The second challenge moved to ground level, where a massive maze filled with poisonous gases waited. The aliens had provided basic environmental suits, but the maze itself was designed to break them. Sharp obstacles, corrosive chemicals, and temperature extremes would gradually compromise any protection, forcing contestants to find the exit before their equipment failed. Most species tried to rush through as quickly as possible, hoping to finish before their suits gave out. The humans took a completely different approach. Ryan Bell used his technical skills to analyze the gas composition, while Amy Foster mapped the maze using small remote sensors. Instead of racing against time, they methodically solved the puzzle. They are treating it like an engineering problem, observed Council Leader Zendar from the viewing chamber. Most species see the challenge and respond with urgency. These humans see the challenge and respond with planning. Kate Williams had positioned herself on the maze walls, providing overwatch and guidance. Tony Martinez identified weak points in the maze structure itself, creating shortcuts by carefully demolishing walls rather than following the prescribed path. When their environmental suits began failing exactly as designed, the team had already mapped 3 different routes to the exit. They completed the maze in 37 minutes, establishing a new record that beat the previous best time by over 2 hours. The final challenge was the automated fortress, a nightmare of defensive systems that had been perfected over decades. Energy weapons tracked movement with perfect accuracy. Mechanical barriers rose from the floor to crush intruders. Automated soldiers with advanced combat programming patrolled the interior. The fortress had been designed to be absolutely impregnable. Captain Clark studied the fortress for exactly 90 seconds before issuing orders. Martinez, I need you to create noise on the east side. Not damage, just noise. Williams, can you hit those sensor arrays on the north tower from here? Negative, Captain. Too much interference from their defense grid. Foster, take Williams and 2 others around to the north side. When Martinez starts his distraction, you disable those sensors. Bell, you are with me. We go in through the main entrance while they are focused on the other teams. The council delegates watched in fascination as 12 humans attacked a fortress designed to withstand armies. Instead of trying to overpower the defenses, they made the fortress work against itself. Martinez created explosions that triggered automatic fire from the energy weapons, which then destroyed the fortress's own sensor equipment. Williams and her team disabled external sensors, blinding the automated systems to movement on that side. Captain Clark and Ryan Bell walked through the main entrance while the fortress was busy shooting at shadows and false targets created by the other teams. Bell's technical expertise allowed him to convince the fortress computers that he and Clark were authorized maintenance personnel, rather than intruders. They reached the fortress core in 12 minutes, officially conquering a facility that had never been breached in 47 years of testing. War Chief Graktor stood in stunned silence as the human team regrouped outside the fortress. His warriors had trained for decades to attempt these challenges, and most never completed even one phase successfully. These 12 humans had finished all 3 challenges in under 2 hours, using tactics and strategies that no council species had ever conceived. Captain Clark, Graktor's voice came over the communication system. How do your people train for such diverse combat scenarios? Clark looked up toward the observation chambers. Sir, with respect, this was not combat training. This was a training exercise. We run scenarios like this every few months to keep our skills sharp. The implications of that statement settled over the assembled aliens like a cold wind. If this was just routine training for Special Forces personnel, what exactly could the regular army accomplish? The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 6 hours after Delta Squad's unprecedented performance on Koros. Council leader Zendar sat at the central podium, his forearms working frantically on multiple calculation devices, while other delegates whispered urgently among themselves. The chamber that had been filled with casual curiosity 3 days ago now buzzed with barely controlled anxiety. Ambassador Jake Morrison and Colonel Lisa Hayes took their positions at the center of the room, both maintaining the same calm professionalism they had shown throughout the first contact process. War Chief Graktor stood behind them, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller than before. The demonstration had changed something fundamental in how he viewed these newcomers. Ambassador Morrison, Council Leader Zendar began, his voice carrying a tension that had not been there before. The performance of your Delta Squad has raised questions that require immediate clarification. We need to understand exactly what your species represents in terms of military capability. Jake nodded respectfully. Of course, Council Leader. We are prepared to be completely transparent about Earth's defensive capabilities. Defensive, War Chief Graktor repeated quietly. You still call them defensive capabilities. The Kithani delegate activated their translator, their insect-like form shifting inside their environmental pod. The 12 individuals who completed our impossible challenges represent what percentage of your total Special Operations Forces? Colonel Hayes stepped forward. Delta Squad is one of approximately 47 Special Operations teams currently active on Earth and our colony worlds. Each team consists of 12 to 15 personnel depending on mission specialization. So roughly 700 individuals total, calculated the Zarathi mathematician delegate. And these Special Operations Forces represent what portion of your overall military? Approximately 2%, Hayes replied matter-of-factly. The chamber fell into the same stunned silence that had followed their first numerical revelations. Council Leader Zendar's calculations showed that if Special Forces were 2% of 20 million active personnel, humanity maintained approximately 400,000 elite soldiers who could potentially perform at the level they had just witnessed. The Silani delegate rustled their leaves, in what Jake's briefing materials indicated was extreme agitation. Your regular military forces, they asked through their bioacoustic translator. How do they compare to these special operations teams? Different training, different missions, Hayes explained. Special forces handle precision operations requiring smaller teams. Regular forces are trained for larger-scale operations, longer deployments, and different tactical situations. War Chief Graktor leaned forward. When you say larger-scale operations, what scale are we discussing? Jake glanced at Hayes, who gave a slight nod. Perhaps it would be easier if we connected you directly with Earth Command. General Paul Carter can provide more detailed information about our military structure. Within minutes, the quantum communication link was established. The central display activated to show a middle-aged human male in a crisp military uniform, sitting behind a desk. Behind him, through large windows, the delegates could see what appeared to be a massive military complex stretching to the horizon. General Carter, Jake said formally. "Thank you for joining us. The Galactic Council has some questions about Earth's military organization." General Carter nodded to the assembled aliens. "Honored delegates, I am pleased to answer any questions you might have about our defensive capabilities." Council leader Zendar activated his translation matrix. "General Carter, we have witnessed a demonstration by 12 of your Special Forces personnel. We would like to understand how representative this performance might be of your larger military organization." "Delta Squad performed well, I hope," Carter replied with evident pride. "Captain Clark and his team have been together for 3 years now. They represent the kind of training and coordination we expect from our special operations community." "The regular army," War Chief Graktor interrupted. "How do they compare?" Carter considered the question carefully. "Different capabilities, different roles. Regular infantry units receive 18 months of basic and advanced training, compared to 4 years for special operations. They operate in larger formations, typically company to division level rather than small team operations." "Division level," the Kethani delegate repeated. "How many individuals constitute a division?" "Standard infantry division runs about 15,000 personnel," Carter answered casually. "Armored divisions are smaller, around 12,000. Marines operate in smaller units, usually regiment or battalion size. The mathematical implications hit every delegate simultaneously. If regular human soldiers operated in groups of 12 to 15,000, and there were 20 million of them, humanity could field over 1,000 such formations. The Veltar military attaché, a scarred veteran named Thokmar, activated his communicator. "General Carter, in our military experience, larger units typically sacrifice individual capability for numbers. How capable is a single regular infantry soldier compared to your special forces?" Carter smiled slightly. "Every human soldier receives combat training regardless of their specialty. A cook, a mechanic, a communications operator, they all complete the same basic combat course. Special forces are more capable, certainly, but any human soldier can fight effectively when required." Council leader Zendar was frantically calculating again. "General Carter, forgive the directness of this question, but according to our analysis, if your regular military forces are even half as capable as the Special Forces team we observed, your species could theoretically conquer every member world of this council." The silence that followed was absolute. General Carter's expression grew serious as he considered the implications of what had just been said. "Council leader Zendar," Carter said slowly, "I appreciate your mathematical analysis, but I think you misunderstand something fundamental about humanity. We did not develop these capabilities to conquer others. We developed them to protect ourselves." "Protect yourselves from whom?" asked the Solani delegate. "What external threat required such massive military development?" Carter's expression grew somber. "We developed these capabilities protecting ourselves from each other. For most of our recorded history, humans have been at war with other humans. Every tactical innovation, every strategic development, every advance in military technology came from conflicts between human nations." War Chief Graktor sat down heavily. "Your species has been fighting wars against itself. For over 5,000 years," Carter confirmed. "We have fought with swords and spears, with gunpowder and artillery, with aircraft and tanks, and with weapons that could destroy entire cities. We have had 2 global conflicts that involved hundreds of millions of soldiers and killed tens of millions of civilians." The council delegates looked at each other with growing horror. A species that had spent millennia perfecting warfare against equally capable opponents would naturally develop capabilities that seemed impossible to aliens who had only fought against different species with different strengths and weaknesses. "We learned something important from all those wars, though," Carter continued. "Victory in battle means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. The greatest victory is the war that never has to be fought. That is why humanity seeks to join your council, not to bring war to the galaxy, but to help maintain the peace you have built." Council leader Zendar set down his calculation devices. "General Carter, your species possesses the military capability to dominate known space, yet you seek partnership rather than conquest. Why?" "Because we have seen what conquest costs," Carter replied simply. "We have learned that the strongest military is one that never has to prove its strength. We would rather build something together than tear apart what others have created." The chamber remained silent for long minutes as the full implications of Humanity's revelation settled over the assembled delegates. They had not encountered a new member species seeking protection and alliance. They had discovered a military power that could reshape the galaxy, choosing cooperation over domination for reasons they were only beginning to understand. Dr. Susan Gray stood before the assembled council delegates in the main briefing chamber of Nexus Station. The human historian had arrived on the same transport as Delta Squad, though her mission was far different from theirs. Her job was to provide context for humanity's military capabilities, and she had spent the last 2 days preparing the most important presentation of her career. Behind her, holographic displays showed images from Earth's archives. The first image was simple enough: ancient humans with bronze weapons standing in formation. The council delegates examined it with mild interest, having seen similar developments in their own species' histories. What they did not expect was how quickly the images would change. "This is human warfare approximately 4,000 years ago," Dr. Gray began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. Bronze Age conflicts typically involved a few thousand soldiers on each side, fighting with hand weapons over local territory disputes. The next image showed medieval knights in armor, followed by formations of soldiers with early firearms. War Chief Graktor leaned forward, recognizing the tactical formations even though the weapons were primitive by galactic standards. 1,000 years ago, human conflicts had grown larger, Dr. Gray continued. Armies of 50 to 100,000 soldiers were common. We had developed gunpowder weapons and begun using them on an industrial scale. Council leader Zendar activated his translation matrix. "Dr. Gray, these numbers seem consistent with the military development of most council species. What changed?" The next series of images answered his question in horrifying detail. Massive battlefields stretched to the horizon, filled with millions of soldiers. Artillery barrages that turned entire landscapes into cratered wastelands. Aerial combat involving thousands of aircraft. Naval battles with hundreds of ships engaging simultaneously. 200 years ago, humanity fought what we call our first global war, Dr. Gray said quietly. Over 70 million soldiers participated across all theaters of combat. 8.5 million died in battle. This was followed 20 years later by our second global war, which involved over 100 million military personnel and resulted in approximately 15 million military deaths. The chamber had gone completely silent. The largest war in council records involved fewer than 2 million soldiers total, and it was remembered as the most catastrophic conflict in galactic history. The numbers Dr. Gray was presenting seemed impossible. The Kethani delegate's translator crackled to life. "These global wars, they were fought between your entire species against an external enemy." "No," Dr. Gray replied, and that single word sent chills through every alien present. "These were wars between human nations. In the Second Global War, approximately 60 human countries participated on various sides of the conflict." War Chief Graktor stood up slowly, his massive frame trembling slightly. "Your species divided itself into 60 factions and fought a war involving 100 million soldiers. The largest single battle involved over 2 million soldiers on both sides," Dr. Gray continued. "The siege of one city lasted 8 months and involved more military personnel than most council species maintain in their entire armies." The holographic display shifted to show technological progression. Weapons development accelerated at an impossible pace. Within 50 years, humans had progressed from single-shot rifles to fully automatic weapons, from horse cavalry to mechanized armor, from wooden ships to aircraft carriers, from simple explosives to weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Every innovation came from military necessity, Dr. Gray explained. When one side developed better armor, the other side developed better weapons to penetrate it. When aircraft were invented, anti-aircraft weapons followed within months. Each advancement in offensive capability drove advancement in defensive capability, which drove further offensive advancement. The Zarathi mathematician was frantically calculating again. "Dr. Gray, this rate of technological development is unprecedented in council records. Most species develop military technology over thousands of years. Your species appears to have compressed similar advancement into decades. Competition drives innovation," Dr. Gray confirmed. "When your survival depends on being better than your opponent, and your opponent is equally motivated to be better than you, advancement happens very quickly." The Solani delegate rustled their leaves in distress. How many of these global conflicts has your species experienced? 2 major global wars, Dr. Gray replied. But we have maintained detailed records of over 15,000 smaller conflicts throughout our recorded history. At any given time in human history, there have typically been between 20 and 40 active wars happening simultaneously in different regions of our planet. War Chief Graktor sat back down, looking stunned. 15,000 conflicts. My people, the greatest warriors in the Council, have fought perhaps 50 major battles in our entire recorded history. The presentation continued with tactical analysis that left the military experts among the Council delegates increasingly disturbed. Humans had developed concepts that no other species had needed to consider. Combined arms tactics that coordinated infantry, armor, artillery, and air support in precise timing. Logistics systems capable of supplying millions of soldiers across multiple continents simultaneously. Intelligence networks that could coordinate operations across entire planets. Dr. Gray, the Veltar military attaché, interrupted. These tactical documents you are showing us, they represent the peak of human military development. Actually, these examples are from conflicts that ended over 70 years ago, Dr. Gray replied. Modern human military doctrine has advanced significantly since then, though we have fortunately had fewer opportunities to test it in large-scale conflicts. Captain Ben Clark, who had been observing quietly from the back of the chamber, stepped forward. If I may add some perspective, honored delegates, the tactics and equipment my team used in yesterday's demonstration represent current training standards, not historical examples. Current standards, Council Leader Zendar repeated slowly. Captain Clark, when you completed the fortress assault in 12 minutes, you mentioned this was routine training. How often do human military units conduct such exercises? Special forces teams like mine typically run complex training scenarios every 2 weeks, Clark replied. Regular infantry units conduct similar exercises monthly. Combined operations involving multiple branches happen quarterly. The implications were staggering. While Council species might conduct 1 major military exercise per year, humans were constantly training, constantly refining their capabilities, constantly preparing for conflicts that might never come. Dr. Gray activated the final series of images, showing human peacekeeping efforts from the last century. What you need to understand about humanity is that we learned from all this conflict. We discovered that our greatest victories came not from defeating our enemies, but from turning our enemies into allies. The same tactical brilliance that made us effective at war, Captain Clark added, also makes us effective at preventing war. We understand conflict because we have experienced every form of it. We know how wars start, how they escalate, and most importantly, how to stop them before they begin. War Chief Graktor looked up at the 2 humans. Your people have spent 5,000 years perfecting the art of war, only to conclude that the greatest victory is peace. Exactly, Dr. Gray confirmed. We seek to join your council not because we need protection, but because we want to help protect what you have built. We have seen what the galaxy looks like when species fight each other. We prefer what you have accomplished through cooperation. The council delegates sat in contemplative silence as the full scope of human military evolution settled over them. They had encountered a species that had turned warfare into a science, only to choose diplomacy as their ultimate weapon. The emergency council session had been running for 18 hours straight when the proximity alarms began sounding throughout Nexus Station. Council Leader Zendar looked up from his calculations as the main display activated to show 3 sleek human ships approaching the station. The vessels were smaller than most Council military ships, but something about their design made War Chief Graktor shift uncomfortably in his seat. Ambassador Morrison, Zendar called out, his voice tight with concern. Are these ships part of your delegation? Jake Morrison checked his communication device and nodded. Commander Rick Stone with the USS Defender and 2 escort vessels. They were scheduled to arrive today to provide transportation back to Earth, following our diplomatic mission. The Cathani delegate activated their translator urgently. 3 ships to transport 12 Special Forces personnel and a small diplomatic team. This seems excessive. Colonel Lisa Hayes stepped forward. Standard protocol calls for adequate protection during diplomatic missions. Commander Stone's ships are equipped for escort duties and potential emergency evacuation if required. What Hayes did not mention, and what became apparent only when the ships moved closer, was that human escort vessels carried more firepower than most Council species' primary warships. The USS Defender alone mounted weapon systems that could engage multiple targets simultaneously while maintaining defensive barriers that no Council weapon had ever penetrated. War Chief Graktor was studying the tactical displays when 3 Council species made a decision that would change everything. The hegemony battlecruiser Wrath of Koros moved to intercept the human ships, accompanied by Cathani assault vessels Hive Mind and Collective Strike. Together, the 3 ships represented the strongest military formation the Council had assembled in over 50 years. What is the meaning of this? Ambassador Morrison demanded, his diplomatic calm finally showing cracks. The hegemony commander's voice came over the communication system. These human vessels will submit to inspection before approaching the station. We must verify that they pose no threat to Council security. Commander Rick Stone's voice responded from the USS Defender, calm and professional. This is Commander Stone of the Earth Diplomatic Mission. We are operating under established first contact protocols and have committed no hostile acts. We request immediate withdrawal of your vessels to avoid any misunderstanding. You will comply with inspection or be turned away, the hegemony commander replied. We have authorization from 3 Council species to enforce this order. The silence that followed lasted exactly 30 seconds. When Commander Stone spoke again, his voice carried a different quality. Ambassador Morrison, are you safe aboard the station? We are secure, Commander, Jake replied. But I strongly recommend avoiding any military action that might compromise the diplomatic mission. Understood, sir, Stone acknowledged. All ships maintain defensive posture only. What happened next would be analyzed by Council military experts for decades. The human ships did not retreat, did not attempt to flee, and did not open fire. Instead, they simply existed in a way that made every Council military system scream warnings about impossible threats. The USS Defender's defensive barriers activated, creating energy fields that registered as impenetrable on every scanner. The 2 escort ships moved into formation patterns that somehow covered every possible attack angle, while presenting no clear targets themselves. Most disturbing of all, human weapon systems came online with targeting locks that tracked not just the 3 Council ships, but every defensive installation around Nexus Station simultaneously. Impossible, War Chief Graktor whispered, staring at his tactical displays. 3 ships cannot maintain targeting solutions on 17 different installations while defending against coordinated attack. The Cathani Collective Strike fired first, launching a full spread of quantum torpedoes that should have overwhelmed any defensive system. The weapons simply vanished as they contacted the human defensive barriers, absorbed so completely that no energy readings registered on any scanner. The USS Defender's response was immediate and precise. Energy beams lanced out to disable the Collective Strike's weapon systems, without damaging life support or propulsion. The hegemony commander ordered all ships to attack, and found his weapons disabled before he could finish giving the command. In 47 seconds, 3 of the Council's most advanced warships had been reduced to helpless targets, while the human vessels showed no sign of stress or damage. Stand down immediately, Commander Stone's voice carried absolute authority. You have fired on diplomatic vessels under established protocols. Any further hostile action will be met with appropriate response. The 3 Council ships retreated quickly, their commanders struggling to understand how their most powerful weapons had been neutralized so easily. Ambassador Morrison activated his communication device with obvious frustration. Commander Stone, was it necessary to demonstrate our capabilities quite so dramatically? Sir, they fired first, Stone replied simply. We responded with minimum necessary force to protect the diplomatic mission. No Council personnel were harmed, and their ships remained fully operational except for weapon systems. Council leader Zendar sat in stunned silence as he processed what had just occurred. 3 escort ships, described by humans as routine diplomatic transportation, had just defeated the strongest military formation in Council space without apparent effort. Dr. Susan Gray stood up slowly. Honored delegates, I believe this demonstrates the point we have been trying to make. Humanity possesses overwhelming military capability, but we choose to use it only when necessary and only to the degree required. War Chief Graktor found his voice. Your escort ships just disabled our most powerful weapons without destroying our vessels. You could have killed everyone aboard those ships in seconds. But we did not, Ambassador Morrison said firmly. Commander Stone's ships used exactly the amount of force needed to stop the attack and no more. This is how humans approach conflict. We end it as quickly as possible with minimum harm to everyone involved. The Solani delegate rustled their leaves in what Jake now recognized as amazement rather than fear. You seek to join our council not because you need our protection, but because you want to protect us. We seek to join because cooperation achieves more than conquest, Jake confirmed. We have spent thousands of years learning that the strongest victory is the one where your former enemies become your strongest allies. Council leader Zendar activated his voting protocols. The council will now vote on humanity's application for membership. All those in favor. Every delegate in the chamber voted in favor. Even War Chief Graktor, who had initially challenged humanity's worthiness, cast his vote for acceptance. By unanimous consent, humanity is welcomed as the 13th member species of the Galactic Council, Zendar announced. Ambassador Morrison, your people have demonstrated that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when not to use that ability. 6 months later, Captain Ben Clark found himself training mixed species units on Nexus Station. Feltar warriors learned human tactical flexibility, while humans learned alien approaches to strategy and logistics. The galaxy's first truly integrated peacekeeping force was taking shape under human leadership. War Chief Graktor approached Clark after a particularly successful training exercise. Captain, your people have taught us something we never understood before. The greatest warriors are those who make war unnecessary. Clark smiled and looked out at the mixed species teams working together. We learned that lesson the hard way, War Chief. Now we get to teach others a better way to find peace. For the first time in Council history, galactic conflicts began decreasing as human-trained peacekeepers helped resolve disputes before they became wars. The species that had perfected the art of war had chosen to perfect the art of peace instead.